Thanks for tuning in to this session of Beyond Bitcoin's Delegate Edition. Giving potential delegates a unique opportunity to discuss their ideas, plans, and goals to help fortify the BitShares ecosystem. If you're a potential delegate and would like to create your own hangout, then please send your request to beyondbitcoin@gmail.com. Are you finding yourself addicted to our hangouts? Need the next fix? Then please vote for our delegate, fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. In addition, you can also check out our new website, beyondbitcoinshow.com, for the latest recordings and events. Now let's join in with our featured delegate.
Today is April 11th, 2015, and I am Fuzzy, today's moderator for our discussions. Bitscape and Roadscape began their peer-to-peer tour in Minnesota. Now they sit before me, a day after their interview with John Barrett of Bitcoins and Gravy, to chat with you about their experiences meeting everyone in BitShares. They have had a heck of a time and some good stories to tell. All you need to do is ask. And with that said, please consider voting for their delegate. Go ahead and tell us your delegate.
Provisional.bitscape and media.bitscape.
And if you enjoy the hangout and like what you hear from them with respect to the future plans and past accomplishments, and then let's go ahead and begin the hangout. How would you like to start this? Would you like to kind of summarize how you started? You started off in Minnesota. I don't know when you got the BitShares symbol on the hoopty, but at some point in time that happened. Where was your first stop after Minnesota?
Well, for those of you who may not have been following our journey, Roadscape and I decided it was high time to hit the road and get out and meet some of the community members that we've had the pleasure of working with online, and to really get to know the people behind the screen, and on to Blacksburg. And so we fired up the BTS mobile and hit the road. We went from Minneapolis. I'll give you the brief overview of the route. We went Minneapolis, Madison, where we caught up with Crypto Prometheus and Solomon. Then on to Chicago for a brief stop. On to Detroit, met with Rodrigo. Philadelphia, where we had a chance to meet with Riverhead, and an excursion up to New York, where we met with Carpet Ride. And then down to Blacksburg, Virginia. Met up with the core devs, including Theoretical, and my brain's going to go blank here.
Vikram, Nathan,
Adam from Follow My Vote,
Valentine,
and Will from Follow My Vote. A bunch of other characters down there. And then on to...
Hate to interrupt, but you talked with Stan and Dan, both Dans, right? You guys had some interesting times in Blacksburg. You said that they were doing some cool stuff down there that wasn't even crypto related, right? It sounded, whenever we talked the other night, the entire location, the locale where they are located is pretty cool in terms of it wouldn't necessarily be the place where you would imagine a bunch of coding going on.
Yeah, well, the Larimer Farm, Half Mile High Meadows, is a pretty sweet little spot. Stan and Dan have all the backup solar and everything else you can imagine ready to go. It's very nice. Beautiful, beautiful country. Stan is every bit the country gentleman that you might imagine, in his overalls, on the porch in the rocking chair with a pitchfork. And we took us on a tour around the land. It was very nice. You guys all probably saw the photo from the day that all the devs and everybody gathered out there. Yeah, I'll just say real quick, all in all, this has definitely been the most inspiring and informative 3 weeks of my life. I've met so many incredible people along the way, and I'm really glad that we took the trip. We've got some really great video footage, and all in all, I think we will have interviewed 14 people, including ourselves, by the time that we get back to Minneapolis. So there's a lot of good content, and we'll be stitching that together in various ways, trying to produce different... I mean, some of the interviews lend themselves to just one-off complete interviews, like the interview with Stan. which is priceless. And a lot of it will get mashed together into a shorter, more informed, kind of a teaser type stuff. As soon as we get back to Minnesota, I'll start trying to edit this stuff, and we'll see what comes of it. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much to talk about, so I guess it'd probably be better if folks had any questions or wanted to just find out about different aspects of the trip or people we talked to.
What's the story behind painting the B on the front of your car? How did that come about?
We met with some of Rodrigo's Detroit crew. There's a lot of makers in the city, and he introduced us to one of their workshops, and he helped us. He actually drafted it up in AutoCAD and sent it to a vinyl cutter printer. It was really cool, and it was like $6 worth of materials, and just a great little piece. Nice conversation starter.
That makerspace was off the hook. They had like 2 3D printers, and I don't even know, every kind of high-tech gadget you could imagine, plus all the down-to-earth, low-tech stuff too. It was just, I felt like I was in some sort of space age maker center, and in the middle of relatively kind of bombed out Detroit. That's a pretty interesting juxtaposition.
The question that I have is kind of what is a makerspace, right? Because you're saying that you had this makerspace, which I'm assuming, since you're talking about 3D printing and things like that, that's obviously for creating things like, any number of things. But is it like an open environment where anybody can go there and utilize it, or is it something where certain companies pay to use it? Or
the name of the makerspace was I3, actually.
Funny.
When we were there was a group of guys there that were designing a leather shoe. It had all these like blueprints and the prototypes sitting on the table. There's a rack of laptops with a bunch of pre-installed software. There's like cut out prototyped circuit boards. Just about anything you can imagine, really.
Is it something where like you and I could walk in the door right now and say, "Hey, I want to make something," and they'll go, "Okay, well, go over here and go, if this is what you want to make, go over here and mess around there," or like after you pay the front desk $10, or is it something like that? Or
basically, yeah, I think there's a monthly membership fee, and the employees there are very helpful, and yeah, you just kind of have free reign to most of the equipment there.
That's awesome.
This is just one of 2 makerspaces in Detroit, and probably more. It's a real DIY kind of community out there. Lots of artists and creators of all kinds. Being a city which is the epicenter of the failure of the American dream, pretty much, also gives rise to all sorts of new possibilities, in the vacuum that it was left behind in the wake of industry moving out. All sorts of people have moved in and started it, it's just it was really inspiring, honestly. I lived in Philadelphia for many years, and a very similar kind of vibe there, where when I lived in Philly, there were over 40,000 abandoned buildings, and so there was just people squatting and gardening and just taking matters into their own hands in really creative ways. And I saw a lot of similar stuff in Detroit, and it was very, very inspiring.
So let me get this straight. What you're saying is, in these places where the industries have basically been destroyed from policies that have been terrible for the locations, the people themselves actually could rise up and make a change themselves, and are doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, industry just kind of abandoned Detroit, and a lot of I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of suffering involved in that. There's certainly a city in crisis, and there's, water shutoffs and all sorts of political maneuvering going on. I'm not an expert on the Detroit political landscape, but I think it's the first place in the country that has been taken over by a emergency manager, an unelected person who was appointed to run the city in the wake of the bankruptcy. So it's a pretty odd scenario, but yeah, there's a lot of people there that are just kind of, it's cheap. It's cheap and it's accessible. So if you're willing to take the challenges, then it's very fertile ground to work in.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know how much you guys follow it, but I follow it quite a bit. There's something called Agenda 21. And generally what happened in Detroit is pretty much what you are going to see in our other large cities. And this is, if you look up Agenda 21, it sounds kind of crazy, but then you have to realize, it just so happens throughout history, crazy people somehow seem to always get into power. And they do, get their way a lot of the time. So we always have to kind of maneuver around that, and we don't want it to resort to violence. So that's what's amazing to see, that people were doing some of these awesome things as far as the makers movement, which you guys are talking about right now, right? I'd be willing to wager that something called NAFTA from way back in the day, some of these trade agreements with other countries were favorable for the other countries and not so much for the United States. So that's also most likely one of the main reasons, because it allowed employers to kind of go overseas instead of sticking to America and our own locations where we have these huge industries built up already. And Ross Perot even said there will be a sucking sound if you pass NAFTA out of America and into all these other countries. So what do we see today? We can look at these people who've talked about it in the past and were ignored, and we can either learn the lessons from them or we can continue moving forward in the wrong direction. And it kind of gets into what we've talked about a little bit with cryptocurrencies prior to starting the recording. It's really important that we all try to recognize this stuff and learn the lessons of history as we move forward, because in a large way, we're planting the seeds of our own empowerment or our own, I don't want to use the term slavery, but enslavement, but to me, it seems kind of a good term to use. Are we going to empower ourselves or not? Are we going to empower others to have power over us? That's really cool, man. And it's good to hear that Rob Rigo's getting down and dirty over there doing this stuff, right? Like, he's the one who introduced you guys to all this.
Yeah, definitely. Rob Rigo is really well connected in the Detroit community and doing a lot of good organizing there. I was really impressed by the number of talented people, from musicians to coders and everybody that he's connected with there, and people that are really turned on to the idea of BitShares and what it represents. And Detroit is, among American cities, I would say, uniquely ready to adopt this technology when it's, when we're not far away, but when it's, when it's ready, let's face it, it's very similar to a third world country in a lot of respects. And these tools are, as you alluded to earlier, they're a lot more valuable in the hands of people who are facing challenging circumstances. When people don't realize there's a problem, they won't adopt this solution. So people definitely know there's a problem in Detroit. So it's really good to see. We're very non-linear thinkers, but so Detroit, we'd have to back up to Madison. We skipped past that. We hung out at the lake house. Crypto Prometheus hosted. It was excellent. We got into Madison where it was still biting cold. So we tried to do some street interviews, but it wasn't happening. People were running for cover. And then we pretty much hung out at the lake house and did some really good interviews with Crypto Prometheus and Solomon. That was the first night of our adventure, and it was a really good way to get started. These guys, Solomon and Crypto Prometheus, you get them in a room together sometime, trust me, it's animated. That we were some pretty serious conversations going on, and both of those guys are full of good ideas, so it was a really good time. Our MO throughout this trip has been to sit down with people and have a little off-the-record conversation the night to know each other and kind of establish some rapport. And part of me wishes that a lot of those conversations were recorded, because in some ways they were the most amazing moments of this trip. But I think we all know that when you record things, and at least in person, it just changes the whole nature of the conversation. So we'll have to do our best to crystallize a lot of these ideas that we gleaned from people at different stops in our journey and into some writing. And I know both Roadscape and I are hoping to have some time to do some writing and reflections on the journey when we get back. So Chicago was really just a pit stop, and it was snowy and slushy and awful, so we just kind of kept moving. Escaped to Detroit. We already kind of covered Detroit. Next stop was Philly, where we were just spoiled by being able to hang out with Riverhead for, I think, 3 days in a row. We got together, Riverhead, and had some great there. Definitely a far-thinking character. Riverhead is in it for the long haul. He's got a really large vision and a very, he's just got a real long view. I don't know another way to put it. And it was really refreshing. This trip, it was kind of at the, I don't know if you call it the beginning of the downslide, but it was a moment when people's spirits were kind of down, and yet everyone we met along the way was very optimistic, because I think one thing that we found in common among everybody that we've met with so far is that they're taking a real long view approach to this, and they're in it to win it, and the bumps along the road are expected. And so that was really refreshing, and definitely raised the spirits. Riverhead is no exception. And he's been doing some great work with the market maker bots, and I'm not like a super technical person, so some of the conversation between Roadscape and Riverhead and Rodrigo was lost on me, but they were going down the rabbit hole, a lot of the cool technical possibilities.
So you were with Riverhead for 3 days, knowing that you've been here for almost a little bit less than a day. We've gotten into a decent bit of stuff while you guys have been here. What was it like? What did you guys do? I mean, and I'm talking business and fun, like you have to have some fun on this trip as well. Did you guys go to any, cool places with Riverhead? Like, what was, I mean, you spent 3 days there.
We were actually in Philly for 5 days. We saw Riverhead for 3 of those days at least. We kind of got all over the place. He's a working man, so by day he was working, and we were staying with friends of mine. I used to live in Philly, so I just stayed in we just all stayed in my old place. And we actually just kind of ended up proselytizing BitShares to the locals a lot in our time, and then we're still getting all the video kind of organized and making sure we had something good to say. So the trip has been a bit of a juggling act, between when you're on the road and moving and changing locations all the time, it can be a little hairy. So when we first got to Philly, it was nice to just kind of dig our heels in for a minute and get our bearings again. We were just starting to get into a flow, like a good workflow, where we knew what roles we were playing, and you got to get all the data off the video, and we're carrying around this precious cargo of data, video and audio recordings that's totally irreplaceable. So, and then of course in Philly was when the delegate was throwing a hissy fit every other moment, and as Roadscape will attest, all sorts of hijinks were had trying to just keep the delegate running, forks and everything else. But we did a great interview with James Riverhead underneath the Canal Street. I can't remember the name of the park right now, but it's under the Walt Whitman Bridge. That was kind of the main thing it was all leading up to. We tried to meet with Genso, but he had other engagements, and it just didn't end up working out. So what else? Highlights of Philly. We just got out and hit the streets. Rodrigo has made these great trifold brochures, kind of like along the lines of what Email to AJ did. And we had those printed out, and we went to anarchist bookshops and other places around town and talked to people and put those up and did some, Philly's got all sorts of cool places to film. So we just got a lot of good B-roll footage and talked to people. And then we realized we had an opportunity to meet up with Carpet Ride up in New York City, as well as another friend of mine. So we took a day and drove up to, and that's in Philly is where we put the decal on the car. So that's when the BTS mobile really came into its own. And we cruised up to New York City with the logo emblazoned on the hood, and that's where we got some just killer footage from the streets of Manhattan with a GoPro and some just bizarrely timed. It's kind of hard to describe. We'll just show it to you guys in a little while here, but lots of synchronicity in New York City, which is pretty surreal. And then we met with Carpet Ride, who's a real solid dude. We weren't able to interview him. We only had a short while, and one thing we learned on this trip is it's very difficult to find good places to interview people without the law coming down on you for one reason or another, or this local security or whomever. People are very filming adverse these days. So you have to do it guerrilla style and get in and get out as fast as you can if you're filming anywhere you don't have a permit or something. So
this is on public sidewalks and stuff like that too. Like, it doesn't matter if it's, or is this like private settings?
It's really wherever. I mean, it depends on how commercial the space is around those quote unquote public sidewalks. There's always some interested party that doesn't want you recording. Even under that bridge with Riverhead, fortunately we got most of the interview done before some just random security guys in a golf cart rolled out on us and told us we couldn't film there without a permit. So, you try to go to these out of the way places and there's people watching everywhere. It's like, what are these guys with the film camera doing? In Detroit, we had a run-in, which was pretty sobering, I guess. We were filming up on the edge of some train tracks. So I wanted to film at the train depot because the train depot is a really iconic and amazing building. It just was once the just center of economic, commerce. People were coming in and out. It was bustling with activity, and now it lays in ruins. So it's a really cool place to film. And I always wanted to shoot there. But when we got there, the lighting was a little bad. It was a little late in the day, and the front of the building was in shadow. So I thought, well, let's go around to the backside and see if there's another view. And so we walked around the back, and there appeared to be another level up we could go to get a better view of the building. And we shimmied up some, I don't know, it must have been like a 5-foot wall, like a concrete wall or a 6-foot wall or something. And then up on top of that, there was this train tracks, and beyond the train tracks was a, razor wire fence surrounding the building because it's privately owned and people have looted the heck out of that building. So they've got and then there's no trespassing signs, but we just figured, we didn't have to do anything crazy to get where we were going there, and we thought it just looked like a nice place to film. Again, somewhere out of the way where we wouldn't be in anybody's business. And so there we are, we're filming. We're probably 15 feet away from the train tracks, and beyond the train tracks is the fence, right? And we're not there for more than 10 minutes before the 2 stormtrooper trucks roll up and cruise up on us, and cop gets out and says, "How you boys doing?" And I say, "Oh, fine, how are you?" He's like, "Better than you are." And that's how we met. And then, yeah, it was love at first sight. They gave us the full shakedown, went through all our shit, groped the hell out of us, and, made us sit on the rubble before them as they, stood looking high and mighty, and just read us the riot act. They just thought it was the stupidest thing in the world that we were up there, and we were just absolutely flummoxed that there was any problem at all. We were like, we just walked up here, and we're just filming a documentary, and we were informed that because we were within this special region near the Canadian border, that we were under DHS purview and subject to all sorts of horrible things. And so for a moment there, we didn't know if the trip was gonna take a sudden turn for the worse or not. But we didn't push our luck or anything. We just kind of stopped talking and sat there mute for a while until the guys checked our IDs and everything, and none of us have any warrants. So they ended up just giving us $200 tickets for trespassing, basically, instead of they're like, well, we're going to let you off easy. It's like the old, we're doing you a favor thing. We could have given you a misdemeanor and hauled you off to jail, but you're just getting this $200 ticket. So you could thank us, that kind of thing. We're like, okay, I'm just making a movie here. Sorry. And anyway, that was that. That kind of interrupted filming that day. We were like, all right, let's go get a drink and chill out. Thank heavens for our freedom. But it turns out that supposed border zone actually extends 100 miles from every border, the United States. So the entire city of Detroit is within that special DHS region. So
this DHS region extends. It's the Constitution free zone. Yeah, which means you literally have no constitutional rights in this zone. And like you said, it extends. If you look at the United States as a map and you look at the border delimitations, right, around the map, 100 miles in from that, everywhere is this constitution free zone, and you guys were obviously in there. Yeah. And these people then, because of that, they have no legal recourse. You have no legal recourse. There's nothing you can do about it. They can pretty much do whatever they want to you, which is kind of concerning.
It takes in huge amounts of the U.S. population because New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, etc.
It's something like 70-80% of the U.S. population lives within 100 miles of the border. It's pretty much the vast majority of Americans.
And one has to wonder. We have no say in this stuff, it seems, anymore, right? And this is really the reason I bring it up is it kind of cuts to the heart of what we're doing in BitShares, right? In most other cryptocurrencies, and this isn't a hatred thing towards other cryptocurrencies, it's just the way it is, right? We live in a world right now where the citizens of a population really have no say, right? And BitShares says, hey, you do have a say. And with that comes the responsibility of learning what you need to learn to make to help make the best decisions moving forward, right? Because imagine if you would have had a say in that situation, there was a time when you could have gone and filmed this stuff, and it's art. What are you doing? It's not like you're sitting there filming with 10 grenades strapped to your jacket, to your vest and packing heat. There's nothing going on up there. You're getting lighting. You're getting to a side of a building that looks beautiful to you that you're trying to capture, and these people come up and kind of stormtrooper in, like you said.
People used to be more reasonable, and cops especially. And I think historically, what you're talking about, Fuzz, is you can probably trace it pretty directly to the new types of training that both the local police and the the Border Patrol and things like that have started to receive. I hate to say this, but post 9/11, right? I mean, that's when the not Gestapo, Homeland Security.
Might as well call it that.
Yes, started to bring in contractors from other countries, Israeli and things like that, and so local police forces are being trained, to view the citizens of the United States as enemy combatants, and you have these people that, let's be honest, are not the highest IQ individuals to begin with, and they are, doing what they're told no matter what, and you have what going on 13, 14 years now, 15 years of training in these very, military style techniques. And this is just sort of a natural outgrowth of that, right? So, these people, they're not reasonable. Back in the day, perhaps dealing with police officers would you could appeal to their sense of humanity and decency and maybe even a little bit of balance and say, well, hey, can you look at this from a little bit from the bigger picture here and see what's actually going on, and and a lot of cops, especially small town cops, were more likely to do that, but it's just not the way it works anymore, unfortunately.
And we come from the perspective of they used to be servants, right? They used to be public servants, officials. That we call them officials these days, right? But they are supposed to be public servants, and just the words that we use to describe them have changed. And once you have those words change, and those replace the old words that used to describe them in everybody's collective lexicon, what you end up having is a completely changed viewpoint of reality, right? Like you said, and it's true. This anti-terrorism training really gets police to this point where they feel like everybody is a potential threat, and not only that is concerning, but when you also look at it, you look at all this military equipment that's coming home from overseas, and now these same police are getting it. So these are things that are really concerning, and I was really stunned. I mean, like I knew it was bad to a degree, but I did not realize quite how bad it was until Bitscape and Roadscape were telling us about it yesterday. Like it's kind of mind-blowing that a camera, something that's used historically ever since its existence to help humanity and to capture beauty and to, as a tool that doesn't hurt anybody. It literally, the only way that you can hurt somebody with a physical camera is physically to hurt somebody with a camera is to slap them across the face with it or something. It's not like they're running around using this thing as a weapon. They're using it as it's supposed to be used. So what's the problem?
Well, it is a weapon of truth, and that's probably pretty frightening. But yeah, anyway, so we could go off about the police state.
Sure.
Did you have other problems with the authorities besides those two?
Not apart from a speeding ticket and a run-in with the security guards on the golf cart, and just the omnipresent feeling.
Yeah, of the golf cart marauders. Yeah. Nothing speaks seriousness about the law like a golf cart.
Does the 100-mile thing, is that like in Florida too? Is that like
everywhere?
Shores too?
Basically everywhere that land meets water or land meets another country, it's 100 miles in from that point. You can look it up online, just Google Constitution Free Zone, and you'll see a nice map.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was somewhat aware of that, but
there's been some challenge about it from the ACLU and various other organizations that have, made it a point to fight on this, issue.
5 or 10 miles or something is at least I can understand, but 100 miles is ridiculous. But anyway.
So did you guys pay your ticket, or are you fighting it, or what?
I think Rodrigo's going to fight it because he lives in Detroit, but for us it's $200. It's kind of like, is probably cheaper to just pay it than to travel to Detroit again and go through all that rigmarole. I'm probably just going to pay it. Well, I'll get around to it at some point, but
there was a lot of negative stuff, it seems like, that did happen, but there was a lot of positive stuff too. Was Blacksburg after Detroit?
we were up in New York City for a day, talking to Carpet Ride, who's got some great financial chops and is a real keen-minded guy. That was a good conversation, and then back to Philly for a hot minute, and then yeah, we headed south to Blacksburg. We'd kind of hoped to stop in Washington and harass some of the monuments, but I think after our experience elsewhere, and also in New York City too, there were just like cops in riot gear with high-powered weaponry and signs that said no filming, no recording and stuff like that. We were going to go out to the Wall Street Bull, and interview people around there, but there were literally guys in like SWAT team gear just standing there with rifles in various places and signs that said no recording. So we were like, I think we'll just sit this one out. And then we were thinking about the same thing in DC. It'd be really fun, but again, between like the time, just getting into DC and setting up and doing anything is a whole day, and then we'd have to stay there. And so we kind of bailed on Washington too, but that could be another trip someday when we're ready for it. But yeah, then on to Blacksburg. And
before you get to Blacksburg, I do have a question for you. How did you feel? Like, did it make you think at all about what we're doing when you're seeing this stuff? To me, it sounds like a silly question because I think I already know the answer. But what comes to your mind when you're seeing this obvious arming up of, it's quite literally, it's a militarization of our society to a level where unless you live around it every day, it's really is concerning to somebody who doesn't know that this stuff's going on, right? Like the people who are there, of course, they get used to it to a degree, but like, does it kind of like stir anything inside of you, like to think about what we're doing and the importance of it?
Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. I mean, I think throughout this whole trip, there was pretty much nothing happening but us constantly reflecting on the importance of the work that's being done with BitShares and blockchain technology, wherever innovation is actually occurring. Yeah, I mean, that's why this is so important. I think this platform, what's going to be, what has been and what will yet be built on BitShares, will fundamentally alter the whole relationship of power among people on this planet, and that can only be good. It's going to definitely level the playing field. When we were talking before about, corporations in Detroit and everything, I was thinking right now, multinationals, and they have the power to pick up and move to Mexico or wherever, but people don't have that same ability because we're stopped at borders and we can't move capital across borders the way that multinationals can. And so this technology is a huge game changer in that, and it's definitely gonna level the playing field. So that's why we think this is so important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. So, but yeah, it's constantly in the back of our mind and the subject of much discussion. Just there was nowhere the conversation didn't go. So yeah, it was really inspiring. But there wasn't really anyone we caught up with that didn't have something profound to say. So my brain is a little get borderline overloaded right now, just from 3 weeks of having really high level discussions with everybody that we've met. I feel like I need a week to just decompress and process most of it. And yeah, I haven't even gotten to Blacksburg yet.
There's a reason why I brought that up. The reason I brought it up before that is because really Blacksburg seems, from what I've talked to you about, and they'll of course hear, like it was obviously, the focal point that, a good focal point for the entire trip. And there's a reason for it being such a great focal point in my mind from the stories that you kind of told me about it. Of course, there was a lot of stuff you couldn't go in detail on, because in the past, we've been so open as a community, and the development team has been so open that it's actually not generally, from what I'm starting to understand, the development team saying something that makes us look bad in the eyes of other people. It's actually tends to be that they give ideas that are then taken by competitors. And they have to be very careful about that stuff moving forward. So with that said, I'll let you go ahead. But it really, I wanted to kind of contrast how you felt when you were in these locations as compared to when you went to Blacksburg. Because it seems like they're really starkly contrasting. I mean, on BitShares on the farm, were there armed guards telling you you couldn't walk to the stream? Go ahead.
Well, just Stan and his pitchfork, but it's that his smile is very disarming, so the pitchfork seems less scary in his hands. Yeah, well, we didn't really spend a lot of time out at the Larimer Ranch, the Half Mile High Meadows. Just one day for the group barbecue that we had, which just turned into a 5-hour long discussion of BitShares related topics, as Stan alluded to. He's like, we had games and all sorts of things, and these guys just sat around and talked shop the whole time. Well, that's pretty true. That's just exactly what happened. But that's what happens when you're passionate about what you're working on. And what we encountered when we got to Blacksburg was a bunch of really passionate guys working on this project. And we drove in, and Stan met us in the parking lot of it's the Corporate Research Center, where they have offices there.
And that's that's in Virginia Tech?
Yeah, it's on one of Virginia Tech's locations. And yeah, Stan met us outside and brought us into the offices. Bytemaster was engaged in a interview at the time, and so we sat down, and it was great first meeting. We just sat down and chatted with Stan, and it's very southern welcome. And Nathan Hort joined in, so it was the four of us. And then after a bit, Bytemaster got done with his interview, and we just sat down, and it was a great conversation. It was a very two-way conversation. I was actually pleased and surprised at how many questions Dan asked us. And he's really looking for feedback from outside of the immediate circle there. Yeah, it was a great meeting, the first of many. We were there for a week, and over the course of that time, we got to meet all the developers who they're just extraordinarily committed to what they're doing. I mean, they're working every day in the offices and coding like maniacs. We got footage to prove it. Roadscape, you want to jump in here with some thoughts on the scene in Blacksburg?
I just saw that the developers were very committed. I mean, I'm not really sure what to say. So, any questions?
This would be a good point to insert a question from Once Upon a Time. What is the mood in Blacksburg with the market cap where it currently is, and are the devs hurting because of low pay? Did you see any evidence that there was a lot of stress around that single point of
most of the stress that I saw was just around taxes, but as Dan has said multiple times in the past, he is committed to looking after the devs. In regards to the mood, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a bummer. The mood wasn't anything like you would have the forums believe, that's for sure.
So they're mostly business and just really trying to do something that they're passionate about.
Absolutely. I mean, they're focused on their work. They're not spending their day talking about, oh my God, look at the price. They're very focused, and they're working very hard.
Yeah, they've got their eyes on the prize, is what I gathered. They're just steely, resolved individuals that really know where this project is going, and they're committed to taking it there. They've got a real clear vision for the future, and it was really reassuring. You know, a big reason we took this trip was to meet Dan and Stan and the core developers so that we could know who it is we're working with, because, you know, I think and then to report back, because I think all of us have the similar experience of, man, I'm giving a lot of time to this project. Okay, who is it I'm really working with, you know? Because until you shake somebody's hand and look at them in the eye and have a real heart-to-heart conversation, it's kind of hard to gauge. So that's largely what I got out of the Blacksburg visit, was just realizing that they're extremely capable people working to make this a success. And I'll tell you that I no longer have any doubts that it's possible. I'm more convinced than ever that this is going to be huge, and this can and will succeed.
So you didn't walk away with a negative impression. You feel like the resolve of the development team has kind of stayed and alleviated anything that might concern you. If you were just watching the forums, would that be a safe bet?
Oh yeah, I know, and that's a big source of concern for me personally, is the forums and how completely, I mean, I understand why the forums are the way they are right now. I feel like my job now is to really articulate why people should have hope in this project, because they should. And I'm going to have to give some more thought over the coming weeks and be more present in the forums. And really, you know, we wanted to make this trip as much a morale booster as anything, and try to create some positive content while we're doing this. So I'll have to deliver on that over the coming weeks as reflections surface. But yeah, there couldn't be two more different scenes than what's going on in the forums and what's going on in the offices in Blacksburg. These guys are Jedis. They're on it. It's just, you know, on the forums and when you're hanging out online or even Mumble or wherever, you just imagine everybody in their little caves, isolated from one another, kind of working on GitHub and doing. But when we get there, we realize that all these guys they're all in an office together. And, you know, to speak to the point about the market cap and everything, they're also being very fiscally conservative too. They've moved out of the bulk of the offices they were renting out and are all kind of sharing one big common room and getting a discount from Virginia Tech for doing so. You know, it became very apparent. I mean, I'm oftentimes not the most fiscally conservative person in the world, and it just became very apparent when we were there that the devs are very mindful of this, and they're adjusting. They're living very humbly. These guys that could be taking other jobs, like, you know, we've heard before, and getting paid the big bucks, and they're not. You know, the collective salary that they're foregoing is staggering to the imagination.
Yeah, I don't know that they're actually taking like a big cut. From what I understand, Dan is paying them what they're worth. They're not eating out of trash cans or anything.
But they are still paying for helping. They're use their tax dollars to help pay for all this Homeland Security stuff that kept you guys from terrorizing the countryside of Detroit.
Well, suffice it to say, they're not living extravagant lifestyles, and they're just like nose to the grindstone. But what I really wanted to communicate was just that all the devs, Stan, Dan, and Adam from Follow My Vote, and Will and their intern, they're all in one space. And there's a lot of great sort of cross-pollination going on between everybody. I understand why it was so important for the devs to be all located together, because it's just a much more fluid environment, and they can get work done a lot more efficiently than, when you're not sharing the same space with people. It can be a little harder.
I'd imagine that it would be that the camaraderie would be a little bit better too, right? Like, I mean, we have Mumble because voice communication is it's far more intimate than the forums. You understand the inflection of people and all that stuff, but you're right. That's only like the next best thing to being able to actually be in the room with people that you're working with, right? Like, meeting you guys for the first time has really been awesome for me, because I've always seen us as kind of like a decentralized family, because we really 100% believe that we need to change the future before the future that we see happen, unfolding before us comes to fruition. And all of us are very, very passionate about that, at the very least. If not by blood, it's by the recognition of the value of the ideas that we all hold dear, that we are kind of like a family. And actually being able to sit down and, I don't want to, advocate drinking, but having a couple beers with you guys and sitting, at the hookah lounge yesterday for a little bit was really cool. Seeing Dr. Fuzzy Beard, aka Rodrigo, with all that magnificent beard right in front of me was amazing. This has been an awesome thing for you guys to visit me on my end. So it's really cool to see that they're together and that they're actually working together, all of them, because if you look at the forums or even on Mumble, what do you see? Like, Vote doesn't even know what's going on in BitShares. They're not even part of the team, really. If you really watch everything on the forums, that's what a newcomer would generally think. But what you guys are saying is like, no, that's nothing like that's not representative at all.
Well, when people are upset about the price, they're going to complain, and oftentimes it's easier to complain than to say constructive things. And yeah, I mean, I just saw these guys working together, and Adam from Follow My Vote is very committed and working on all sorts of useful things. I really feel that all of us that really believe in this project should be making an effort, myself included, more so once the earth stops moving under me every day, to make an effort to get on the forums and talk about the accomplishments and the exciting projects that are going on, so that when newcomers arrive, they're not met with this wall of doubt and concerning threads. And also, man, don't feed the trolls. Every time we bump those threads to the top, I'm not sure that a little bit of pushback is worth it, but beyond that, you're just giving them the limelight. I say just create a different thread. I mean, RG Crypto, brilliant move when he just let's start a new thread, same name, and just took it in a more positive direction. It was useful, and got people to retweet about Moonstone. That was great. So I'd rather see people just creating, for every troll thread that gets created, just create two more that are not troll threads, about positive, or constructive, things that we can discuss. I'm not saying we need to just be the village of the happy people, but we can definitely approach a lot of these projects without resorting to feeding the trolls.
Well, what's interesting to me about delegated proof of stake is, quite literally, I do not know of a cryptocurrency where trolls have so much potential power. They can get people to divest in another cryptocurrency, but generally, like, a post could get people who are working on viable projects, quote unquote, fired overnight in the heat of the moment without really getting people to look at the value that these people were providing. Like, for instance, with you guys and your delegate, and this is very interesting because you guys have spent a lot of money, and I know that you probably don't want to talk about it, like it's not anybody's business necessarily, but you guys have spent a lot of your own money on this trip to get this done, right? And this is just the first part. This isn't all the work that comes after the trip's over, right? So you guys are preparing to do a lot of hard work, and you've largely paid out of pocket to do it. And what was interesting to me that in that thread was that we actually came to a point where you had a list of people whose delegates were on the chopping block that they found were, these were the people the delegates that weren't pulling their weight. It really shows a lack of understanding of what's going on in the entire ecosystem, because a lot of people were moved just by emotion to vote. And out of all the delegates that were on that list, yours was probably the highest voted at one point in time. And there were people who don't even come to our forums anymore who have a delegate in that needs to be voted out. So there are these issues that I think that it's awesome. That it's awesome that we have this voice, that we're allowed to have this chaos and go through it and grow. Whereas most of these other cryptocurrencies, as a citizen, all you do is just hold the token and that's it. You know what I mean? You don't get to make any decisions. You're not that guy. You're the person who brings value to the token by just using it. And who cares what else comes of it? There are other people who get to make the big decisions. But it's a very interesting dynamic that you bring up. I'll say that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't comment in that thread and vote in that poll, obviously. And I don't know. It's fine that, in the future, if delegates aren't performing or whatever, I know we're evolving mechanisms to hold people accountable and whatnot. I understand why the devs aren't on the forums a lot. They're getting work done instead. It's great to see updates from once in a while, and we have the Wall Street Journal that comes out once a month, and if nothing else, you can read about what every delegate's been doing in the journal. But I might be in the forums a little bit more because I'm more focused on grassroots organizing and marketing and stuff like that, so I'm going to be around. But expecting delegates to be available to defend themselves in their delegacy whenever some thread comes up is just ridiculous. We'd get nothing done. To have your work micromanaged by conceivably any shareholder at any moment, I don't think is the most constructive way of making people accountable. I think regular interval reporting about what you've been up to, what progress you've made, what kind of help you need, what else you think needs to be done is great. And we can do better. Obviously, we're gonna grow. We're gonna evolve tools to address legitimate concerns that people have about delegates or whomever. But a lot of the forum stuff can be overkill, kind of sometimes. Yeah, that poll was just, I don't know. My attitude towards it was just well, money talks and bullshit walks, basically. Let's see if anyone votes. If it's just a poll, so we'll see what there's an actual voting mechanism, and you can use it right from within your client. Go for it. Or if you're losing faith, then vote them out.
Forum polls, you can't even check who's participating or how high of a turnout you have.
I'll tell you what, I've always tried to orient myself, at least philosophically, to view these types of things as well, and I think you guys probably agree to a large extent, as I don't want to say a blessing, but maybe a blessing in disguise, because we are going what we're doing, of course, is so revolutionary, and the tools that we have are so advanced that there are what do I want to say? There are weaknesses. There are certain weaknesses that are being exposed, and they're being exposed early on, which is a really good thing. Like has been mentioned quite a few times, if our market cap was at hundreds of millions of dollars and all of a sudden these weaknesses were exposed, we would have a lot bigger problem on our hands and possibly a lot more fatal situation. So, our abilities to look at these things in a balanced way and understand that even if there are people that are hostile, say, well, I appreciate that there is someone who has, seems to have a bit of animosity, to put it lightly, and perhaps it would be someone else. But I appreciate that he is doing that right now, because I'd rather have him be doing that right now than someone else down the line who could potentially do more damage. And so we look at the situation and we think, okay, what are the tools that we need? Can we imagine, ways in which we can strengthen our network, both in the sense of a human network and the protocol, in order to come up with creative solutions to strengthen our abilities and to make us more robust.
Well, it's part of the growing of our community and the entire ecosystem, right? I mean, when Dan and Stan a while back said that, it's kind of like this DAC's still a baby, but it's growing up a little bit at a time, that's kind of how I look at it as far as the analogy. It's like, yeah, the baby can now walk on both his feet. He can walk around, but don't ask him to run. Don't ask him to, do any of these advanced milestone things that you see in a 4 or 5 year old. These things take time, and organic growth takes time. And I think that's what's really interesting, is because in every other cryptocurrency, you really don't need to have that kind of resolve, right? Their community doesn't need to have that type of resolve. So the people who come here and stay are going to be rocks. They're going to be rocks that doesn't matter what storm comes along. They're going to be here because they know that something like BitShares needs to exist.
And the flexibility of what DPost brings to the table is unparalleled. I mean, there's no other currency that has even close to the level of flexibility. I mean, we're assuming that Ethereum is still vaporware, so we can't really comment on that. But I mean, that's our strength. But of course, with flexibility also, you can be too flexible, right? And flexibility could actually be a weakness, because you can't actually decide what you want to do. You have all these different possibilities, and so the market looks at it and says, well, they don't have their shit together. What is BitShares, right? Type of thing. So I think that our greatest strength, we have to try to embrace that and understand that we need to develop ways to solidify our vision as a community, and not just rely upon, which we don't do, but not just rely upon all the different features that we're going to have. Because I mean, BitAssets is the best example, right? Like, everyone here understands how revolutionary it is, and it's a proven concept, and how great it could be for the people of the world. But we still haven't figured out a way to translate that, or to find a niche for that to fit in. So the way that things are adopted generally is you actually have to have a need and a niche, and then the resources to actually apply yourself to that. And so we are still very, very young. That's the lesson to take away from all of this. And the market cap, I hesitate to say it doesn't matter, because it does, but it's not something that I worry about much more than about 5 to 10% of my my energy, because there's so much more that needs to be done as far as groundwork goes. And I think that's another reason why all crypto is in a bear market right now, right? Is because the rest of the world, or even people that are holding holding crypto tokens are in this stage where it's like, all right, well, we've all kind of gotten over this initial hoopla about how this could be, but now we're in this stage where it's like, all right, well, I need to see actual evidence that this is happening, and the markets are deciding that hasn't quite gotten to that stage yet. So everybody's down. Everybody is in horrible shape. There are several, let's put it this way, there are several individuals, like over 100 just in the United States, whose individual net worth is worth more than the entire market cap of crypto right now. So if you think about the inequalities and the imbalance and the reality of how young all of crypto is right now, then it's real easy to keep these things in perspective and understand that first and foremost, every community member in BitShares needs to have a support network to feel empowered and be able to apply themselves and in making an effort to strengthen our community, and I think that's going to be the best way for us to start to actually gain more traction in the world at large.
I hate to interrupt, but I do want to get to. We've kind of gotten, I don't want to say off topic, because it really is, this is something that's kind of stems from what we're talking about here to a degree. But you guys, Blacksburg was where we were. Were there any stops in between here and Blacksburg? Or was it directly here was the next?
No, we came directly to Nashville from Blacksburg, and I don't know if I have any other closing thoughts about Blacksburg. Well, I do want to say that we interviewed Adam and Will from Follow My Vote. We interviewed Vikram. We interviewed Valentine, as well as Dan and Stan, of course. And am I missing one person?
Did you mention Nathan?
Oh, Nathan. That's who I'm missing. Who's a great singer, by the way.
And actually, before rolling into Meet Fuzz, we went on the Bitcoins and Gravy podcast with John Barrett.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I hope he's able to release it soon. I think it went really well. He expressed it as pretty hard to follow BitShares. He was still trying to figure out what happened to AGS and PTS. So, I thought we were kind of through that period and had simplified it, but there's still unresolved questions, and so we introduced him to market-pegged assets. Rodrigo talked a lot about the history, and I think we laid it all out pretty well. It was a great conversation.
So he was basically saying that he didn't understand BitShares hardly at all compared to what he thought he did. You guys went out before the night before, right, and had dinner with him or lunch or something to that effect, right?
Yeah, that evening we went out to have dinner with him just to meet each other and see where he was at, so we could figure out which direction to take the podcast in. And he was very excited to hear about it.
Now, whenever he understood a little bit better, did you see any lights come on? Wait a second, there's a lot here that I didn't realize.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. But there is a lot to digest. BitShares has a long history already, and it's only been a few months. Well, 7-8 months, and there was a lot of ground to cover. So I'm really glad we got most of it in the podcast. That's something you can revisit, and I think it definitely sparked something in him.
Shout out to Rodrigo for doing just an amazing job going into all the mechanics at top speed, on the fly in an interview, and Roadscape as well. I'm amazed. I'm still practicing my ability to be able to break these concepts down, at light speed. But Rodrigo's really got his chops down, and he's been working on a Wikipedia entry and just kind of putting himself through his own BitShares education, as it were, and it's really paid off. So it was great also to have him on the trip. He really rounded out the team and made us kind of an unstoppable force. No matter who we would talk to, we could kind of approach it from any angle and address any question that came up, which was really cool. But yeah, I thought the interview went really well, and once again we had even more far-reaching, wide-ranging conversations with John Barrett, outside of the interview, and he's definitely an ally. He's somebody we should pay attention to and reach out to. So I'll leave you guys with that on that. And that was moments before we got to meet up with the illustrious Fuzzy. This has been great. I feel now it's kind of weird because I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about yesterday. But it's been super great to meet you, Fuzzy, and
Likewise.
And like many of our other guests, many of our other hosts, you've shown us great hospitality. It's just super inspiring to meet the faces behind the voices and really connect with people. This is going to have to happen again on a larger scale. And,
BitShares Island.
Yeah, BitShares Island. We've been talking about getting a bus.
Go on tour.
Yeah, and at some point during the
Burning Man.
Yeah, exactly. I do wanna get a BitShares contingent to Burning Man. I've been kind of waiting to roll that idea out.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's time people start planning. Put it on their calendar. We can make a post later, but that's a whole other topic, but I do think that Burning Man would be an amazing place to take this. I mean, because we've kind of got 50 to 100,000 of the most creative, talented, industrious, enterprising, crazy people you can imagine that are exploring the bleeding edge of any number of areas of human development. So I think honestly it would be a really good thing for the community to do. But yeah, gosh, after this we're today, what time is it? Oh man, at some point we're rolling into St. Louis, and got nothing huge planned for today other than rest up, and tomorrow we're hopefully meeting up with Tom.
There's a lot of driving today.
Yeah. But meeting up with Tom, and then I'm going to visit the grave and memorial of one of my ancestors, Elijah Parrish Lovejoy, who was an abolitionist. He died in Alton, Illinois, defending his press from a mob, and I thought that'd be a good place for me to just sort of begin wrapping up this tour at the site of a freedom fighter for press freedoms and human dignity in Alton, and then tomorrow meet with Tom, and then we begin the road back to Minnesota. Just a brief stop in Iowa City to pause for a moment, break up the journey, and then we'll be back in Minneapolis on Monday if all goes well. Anything you guys want to add, or any questions that anyone else has about the trip?
First off, I'll say that this went a lot longer than I had actually originally thought it would. So, it's cool to me that A, you guys are here. B, it's awesome to me that you have delegates who come on here and they're talking about the cool stuff that they're doing, right? We've talked about where you've been, what you've done, some of the amazing things you've seen, the stark contrast between some of the stuff that we're seeing on some of the moods that we're seeing on the forums as opposed to what's going on behind the scenes in real life. And you guys have been kind of at the heart of all of it. right? I mean, you guys have been behind the scenes. You've been connected with all this stuff, and it's really cool that you are so open about it, about the process, because although you might hear a lot of people complaining about, there's not a whole lot going on here, there's a lot of stuff going on. Like, I could reach out to, if I got everybody who's a delegate to actually talk a little bit about what they're doing, I would be so ridiculously busy every weekend. We have at present, a number of them, probably a third or a quarter of all the delegates who like to actively come on and talk. But you guys coming out and reaching out and being so open, it shows people what you're doing, right? So you might have people who are complaining and saying, that what you're doing is not adding value, which of course God knows they say the same thing about me. But the thing is, you're showing it right now, what you've done. And some of the stuff that you're doing right now early on it gives me high hopes, because I know that the content that you're getting is going to be used for some amazing stuff in the future too. So I want to thank you guys for doing this. I mean, setting out on this trip, it's not easy being chased around in a golf cart by people in a golf cart with badges. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it was stressful for you. But you guys endured it because there's something more valuable that's going on. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for being here, literally, physically here. Just thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank Zeldal and BitShares Breakout, without which we wouldn't have had some really critical equipment that we needed to get the good audio and some other things. So if you haven't already voted for BitShares Breakout, please do so. I really think that's a useful function in this space, is having a sort of discretionary funding delegate like that can put energy into different projects. Also the infographics, which I don't know if they've been rolled out yet, but they're looking really good, and that's largely a result of funding from BitShares Breakout at this point. So that's that. And I mean, we wouldn't have been able to make this trip without the willing participation of so many people in this community that made it possible. And I was really impressed at the amazing range of personalities on this trip so far. We didn't meet carbon copy, people just all resembling one another with the same line. Everyone's got a unique take on things and really unique talents that they bring to bear, and everyone's been extremely hospitable and welcoming. It's just if the first week of the trip, I just kept thinking, if this is any indication of what this community is made of, we've got great things ahead. I think it was Dan that mentioned, you don't invest in technology, you invest in people. And we're doing really good on people right now. The ones that are here and active and still committed to this project are real gems. So, anything we can do to keep the morale up and the train moving forward will make our jobs all collectively easier. And thanks to Fuzzy for keeping the torch burning on the Mumble space here. This has been the virtual community gathering space since I found BitShares, and I don't think it would be the same without it.
Well, if you like it, put a ring on it. Vote for Fuzzy.Beyond Bitcoin.
Done. You have anything to add? Any closing thoughts, Roadscape?
No, not really. It's been great, and I just wanted to thank everyone that supported us.
I want to say that both Brandon and Tim, Bitscape and Roadscape, were really interesting and really excellent people themselves. They all their focus obviously has been on all of us, but you guys have taken it upon yourselves to do something really awesome here. And I think that this, we talked a little bit about this just being a preview, even before. I remember a few weeks ago before you went, you're like, well, we're gonna get some good video footage, whatever we can. We're not gonna stress too much about it. Let's do the best we can, and then that'll get the ball rolling. And I got to say, man, I really feel like you guys have accomplished that and so much more. And as far as being a catalyst to really move forward with joining everyone together. I really kind of felt like I was connecting with everyone, even though I only connected with you guys, and even though it was only the first leg of the journey. I sent you guys off, in my mind, in my heart, with the idea that you're creating this bridge between a lot of us, at least here in the United States, and so I want to thank you guys again, for doing what you did, and say, I'm looking forward to many more good times to come.
Thank you.
You're here.
Yeah, thanks, Crypto Prometheus.
With that said, if no one else has any other comments, I'm going to go ahead and tell you to stop the recording, and thank you everybody for joining us for this hangout.